Hi, fourth graders. I'm going to be reading from the Borrowers, chapter 14. So just get comfortable and you can listen and be prepared to talk about chapter 14 when we meet. Pod did not speak until they reached the sitting room, nor did he look at her. She had to scramble after him as best she might. He had ignored her efforts to help him shut the gates, but once, when she tripped, he had waited until she got up again, watching her, it seemed, almost without interest, while she brushed the dust off her knees. Supper was laid and the ironing was put away, and Homily came running into the kitchen, surprised to see them together. Pod threw down his borrowing bag. He stared at his wife. "What's the matter?" said Homily, looking from one and then to the other. "She was in the night nursery," said Pod quietly, "talking to that boy." Homily moved forward, her hands clasped tremblingly against her apron, her startled eyes flickering swiftly to and fro. "Oh no," she breathed. Pod sat down. He ran a tired hand over his eyes and his forehead. His face looked heavy like a piece of dough. "Now what?" he said. Homily stood quite still, bowed over her hands clasped together, and stared at Arrietty. "Oh, you never," she whispered. "They're frightened," Arrietty realized. "Oh, wow, they're not angry at all. They are very, very frightened." She moved forward. "It's all right," she began. Homily sat down suddenly on a cotton spool. She had begun to tremble. "Oh," she said, "whatever shall we do?" She began to rock herself very slightly to and fro. "Oh, Mother, don't," pleaded Arrietty. "It isn't so bad as that. It really isn't." She couldn't find the letter. She had slipped in the back of her shirt. When she found it, it was very crumpled. "Look," she said, "here's a letter from Uncle Hendriri. I wrote to him and the boy took the letter." "You wrote to him?" cried Homily on a kind of suppressed shriek. "Oh no," she moaned and closed her eyes. "Whatever next? Whatever shall we do?" And she fanned herself limply with her bony hand. "Get your mother a drink of water, Arrietty," said Pod. "Whatever made you do such a thing, Arrietty?" said Homily. Homily was a little more calm at this point. So Arrietty told them about being seen that day under the cherry tree and how she had kept it from them and didn't want them to worry, and what the boy said about dying out, and how, more important than ever, it was very important to know that the Hendriris were alive. "Do you understand?" pleaded Arrietty. "Please understand. I am trying to save us." "Oh my goodness, save us?" Pod repeated. "It's people like you, my girl, who do things suddenly with no respect for tradition, who will finish us borrowers once and for all. Do you see what you have done?" Arrietty met his eyes. "Yes," she said, "I've gotten in touch with the only other ones still alive, so that," she went on bravely, "from now on we can all stick together." "Stick together?" Pod repeated angrily. "Do you think Hendriri's lot would ever come back to live here? Can you see your mother walking across 2 fields and a garden, 2 fields full of crows and cows and horses and whatnot, to take a cup of tea with your Aunt Loopy, whom she never liked much anyway?" "But wait," he said, as Arrietty tried to speak. "That is the point." He leaned into her. "Arrietty." "Oh no," said Arrietty. "I never told him. You told him? You told him so much. About the kitchen pipe bursting. You told him about how our stuff got washed away to the grating." He sat back down, glaring at her. "He's only got to think," he pointed out. Arrietty was silent, and Pod went on. "That's the thing that has never happened before, never in the whole long history of the borrowers. Borrowers have been seen, yes, and have been caught, maybe, but no human being has ever known where any of the borrowers lived. We are in very grave danger, Arrietty, and you have put us there, and that is a fact." "Oh, Pod," whimpered Homily, "don't frighten the poor child." "No," said Homily. "No, Homily," said Pod, more gently. "My poor old girl, I don't want to frighten anyone, but this is serious. Suppose I said to you, pack up tonight all our bits and pieces. Where would you go?" "Not to the Hendriris," cried Homily. "Not there, Pod. I could never share a kitchen with Loopy." "No," agreed Pod, "not to the Hendriris. And don't you see for why? That boy knows about them too." "Oh," cried Homily. "Yes," said Pod. Oh, Pod, she began to tremble. The thought of living there with them? I just can't do it. Well, it's no good thinking of it now, said Pod. He turned to Arrietty. What did your Uncle Hendry say in his letter? Yes, exclaimed Homily. Where is this letter? It doesn't say much, said Arrietty, passing over the paper. It just says, tell your Aunt Loopy to come home. What? Exclaimed Homily, looking at the letter upside down. Come home? What could he mean? He means, said Pod, that Aunt Loopy must have set off to come here and never arrived. Set off to come here? Repeated Homily. But when? How should I know? Said Pod. It doesn't say when, said Arrietty. But, exclaimed Homily, it might have been weeks ago. It might, said Pod, long enough anyway, for him to want her back. Oh, cried Homily, all those poor children. They are growing up now, said Pod, but something must have happened to her, exclaimed Homily. Yes, said Pod. He turned to Arrietty. See what I mean, Arrietty, about those fields? Oh, Pod, said Homily, her eyes full of tears. I don't suppose none of us will ever see poor Loopy again. Well, we wouldn't have anyway, said Pod. Pod, Homily said, I am frightened. Everything seems to be happening at once. What are we going to do? Well, said Pod, there's nothing we can do tonight, that is certain. But have a bit of supper and a good night's rest. He rose to his feet. Oh, Arrietty, wailed Homily suddenly, you naughty girl. How could you go and start all of this? How could you go and talk to a human being? If only. I was seen, cried Arrietty. I couldn't help being seen. Papa was seen. I don't think it's that awful, as you're trying to make it out to be. I don't think human beings are all that bad. Well, they're good and they're bad, said Pod. They're honest and they're artful. It's just as it takes them at the moment. And animals, if they could talk, would say the same. Steer clear of them. That's what I've always been told. No matter what they promise you, no good really ever comes from any one human being.